Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Monday Night Wellness Stories. I'm Sherry Danzig, and tonight we have a theme of our stories that we're going to hear, and it's all going to be focused on one product. Sometimes we do that, focus in on one product. We love all of the products of the Wellness Home, but this product is really special. It's called the Cocoon, and it's part of our sleep system products. So it's about sleeping and being cocooned, and that by itself sounds really great to be cocooned. To me, that sounds like, you're going to take a deep breath and just go, right? And that's kind of what this technology does. So, without further ado, Debbie, I'm going to invite you to share a story that you've experienced or your grandsons have experienced with the cocoon. But you're muted.
Unmute. Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, I have just these two wonderful grandsons, 4 and 7 years old. And I got the cocoon simply because it looked like it could be a lot of fun because it's like a sleeping bag. And I know that these two rambunctious grandsons of mine, one's at one end of the spectrum, the other one's at the other end of the spectrum. And they just love, they're full of life and full of energy. And I thought they would probably love this. And so I got the cocoon and I unzipped it and I told them to get on, to lay on it, which they obliged and did, if you can believe that about two little energetic boys. And then I began to zip it up. When I tell you that they twisted and turned inside of that, but what they didn't know, as I was really trying to get them to be calmer, by getting in there and experiencing the technology that's afforded by the cocoon. So while it was a plaything for them, it really had a nice calming effect for them. So I just loved it because they're just two regular rambunctious little boys, like I said. So that's my story about the cocoon.
Thank you, Debbie.
You're
Hattie
welcome.
Jane, you had an experience with how it regulated your body temperature. Share that, please.
Now, I am far beyond your grandsons. I'm now 82 and come up the temperature, and my at the moment it was 64 in my bedroom. Well, Arthur and I, we can control, and I can creak along at times. I cuddled into that thing, and as a blanket, I unzipped it and I just wrapped it around me. I was so comfortable and I was cozy and and I got up and I was able to move. So yeah,
That's
I like
awesome.
my cocoon.
I love it. I love it. Wonderful. Barbara Richmond, can you share a story, please?
Yes, having 4 weeks ago had two operations. The second one being the most difficult. And I was told it would be a long, slow, difficult recovery. I was sleeping on the sofa in my living room because it has to be at a certain height post-surgery, and my bed's 3 feet high. So I had the old green travel pad underneath me, followed by the Fit, the cocoon on top of me, and the Makura pillow at my head. And I was just as comfy, cozy as I could possibly be. I'm sure it contributed to beneficial sleep, because in the last 4 weeks, I've only had 3 nights out of 4 weeks where I've not had top quality sleep.
Mm.
And, just having it tucked up underneath my chin, I didn't have it zipped up because if I needed to get up and get to the washroom, I needed to be able to move relatively quickly and to be able to throw it off. And with it being so lightweight, it wasn't stressful to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I swear by it. And I
That's so
also,
important.
in the wintertime,
Mm-hmm.
I have a spare one in my car at all times in case I'm ever stuck in a snowstorm and I have to keep myself warm instead of running the car engine all the time.
That's
So
awesome.
thank you.
Absolutely. That's great, Barbara, because the fact that you were able to sleep is so correlated with a faster
Healing.
recovery. Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
you don't heal, you don't recover from
And you
surgery
end up
if you don't
not
sleep
having to
well.
take as many of those dreaded drugs that they want to foist on you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Barbara. Pam, you've got a story about the cocoon. Please share.
I do. My cousin has needed to go in for the last 10 weeks to have some things done once a week. And I had the privilege of going with her this past one. But on her very first one, she called me and said, "You know, I was really cold while they were doing this for me." And I said, "Well, did you take the cocoon with you?" She goes, "I thought I'd be hot in that." So she goes, "No, I'm taking it next time." So what we did, she went in, she lines the chair, big lazy boy chair with the cocoon, and she puts her far infrared gloves on with the ceramic reflective fibers, and she sits there and she looked like a pretty little pea in a pod. She folded it around her and drifted right off to sleep. She doesn't get cold anymore. It's just worked great for her. And when she finished and she went to the restroom, the lady next to us said, "I've never seen anybody do that." And she knows that my cousin looks really good while she's doing all of this. And she said, "What is that thing she wraps herself in?"
Mhm.
So I got the privilege of sharing with it. So it is dynamic. She slept for 2.5 hours during this. So it was
Mm,
great.
what a blessing. That's awesome.
Yeah, you
That's
never
awesome.
know when you need it. So everybody
That's
needs to
right.
have one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a couple things I want to share about the cocoon that I love so much is it's hardy. It's not white. Our comforters are wonderful, but they're white, and so they tend to get a little bit messy. And mixing a young child that might have things on their fingers or something, is maybe not the best combination. So it's hardy. It's like Debbie said. It looks kind of like it's got that what is that called? That material like a sleeping bag, but I can't think of what it's called. That's
Please.
like flannel, right? So it's hardy, it's easy to wash, so it's very practical. It's priced right, so it's very affordable for kids. And there's something about how you can unzip it and it's a comforter, or you can zip it up and get inside of it. And I mean, I've had so many experiences before the cocoon was even out when my kids would be, we're teenagers. I have three daughters, and they would get too much sun. We'd go to the beach and they'd get sunburned, and I would have them wrap up in cocoon them in the comforter, and that would make a big difference in easing up that terrible redness that they would get from being out in the sun too much. So now we have something that does it naturally. The story I really want to share, though, is I had a mom of a special needs kid, and he wasn't sleeping well, and he had issues with focusing and some behavior issues, and I loaned him a cocoon, and he is not been a good sleeper. And she got so excited; she was literally crying on the phone when she called me to tell me that she wasn't giving it back because I had loaned it to her. She wasn't giving it back. How much is it? I have to buy it because my son is sleeping, and so I'm sleeping. And so, we've continued to stay in touch. She's got the waterfall now in her home as well, and it's just made such a difference with her little boy. And so I also remember another family that when I first loaned them for, again, special needs child, she was putting the mattress topper. This is back in the days when we used to have the heavier topper, and she was putting it on top of her. She didn't know how to deal with it. So when we got the cocoon and we wrapped her in it again, I mean, it just seems to be the right thing, the right weight for kids that maybe they want a little bit more weight and they want that. It's like you can create it kind of as a plaything, like you were saying, Debbie. It's almost like a tent or something. So it kind of innately is something that kids are drawn to, and the technology is there to really help to quiet them, to create the most perfect temperature. So I love the cocoon. So I'm glad we're talking about it. One other thing I simply want to share about all of our products that have this special ceramic fiber. I was saying this earlier, is that I always keep one in the car too. I keep a travel blanket in the car because the fibers do what they do and they help to If you're hot natured, they cool you down. If you're cold natured, it helps to warm you. I don't quite understand it. I'm not a scientist, but I do know that if I am driving around in the hot days of Atlanta and I've got cold food that needs to stay cold in my car, and I tend to go out and then I'm like, oh, I got to run this errand. I got to run this errand. I can take the comforter, whichever one it is. I've even used the pillowcase and wrap it around the food. And I come back to the car and the car is baking. It's hot and the food stays cool. It is remarkable. It does wonderful things to the body, and it's great. There's a practical way to keep your food lasting longer and cooler. So I just wanted to mention that too. And I've heard that story. I mean, it never gets that cold here, but if I lived at a really cold temperature, I would most certainly want to have a comforter during the winter. We're not in the winter months anymore, because God forbid you get stuck. What are you going to do if your car runs out of gas? How do you stay warm? These are technologies. It's like having a natural heating unit. So it does amazing, amazing things. Barbara, did you want to share one more thing before we wrap up?
Yeah, you reminded me of something else. Early on in the days of being introduced to Nikken, I had pneumonia, and we had doctors in-house at the time, and they watched me cough and told Wayne to take me and get x-rays because they felt that I'd broken some ribs. When we got back, I had broken 3 ribs. The doctor said, now you go and rest, little lady. We'll look after everything up here. I went down on our dock and I had the comforter, the far infrared comforter, the travel comforter.
Mm-hmm.
I lay on the chaise lounge. I had a sun bonnet over my face. Underneath that blanket, I slept for 2.5 hours. Wayne came and woke me up, and there wasn't a drop of sweat on me, and it was 87 degrees that day.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get over how I had slept so long and not been stifled by the heat with a blanket on top. So there's another.
Yeah. If you want your temperature, help with balancing your temperature, this is a great tool to have. Great resource.
Yeah.
Thank you all. It's been wonderful to hear your stories, and we'll be back next week with more fabulous stories.